Good day, Msimanga. Welcome to Solid Sessions. Again, another session where we're talking to the men in the arena. Today, as I said, we want to then ensure that we engage with ordinary South Africans. We want to talk to South Africans about their experiences, about their dreams, about their homes. I want to talk to South Africans about their everyday life and, what makes them tick. We want to talk to them about their families. I want you to get to know them a whole lot better than you might know them. But I also want you to get into the insight of who they are, what they're all about, what is it that they want to then see happening. And today, my special guest is none other than Helen Zille, who's been the leader of the Democratic Alliance, a very, 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 very stalwart of democracy here in South Africa, somebody who's really been to the trenches, and we'll get much more to what she has been doing and what she has done, what she has seen. And we are going to have some fun as we're talking to Helen, but we're also going to talk to the history, we're going to talk to the present, and we're going to talk to the future of where we are in South Africa and what is her contribution in that. So Helen, thank you very, very much for joining me in Solid Sessions today. Today, you're the man, or let me say the woman in the arena, but thank you very, very much for joining me. Do you want to greet the viewers and say that, why you're here?
Yes, I'd love to greet the viewers. Hi to everybody. And Solly and I have been in the trenches for many, many years together. We've been fighting inch by inch for democracy in this country, and it's fantastic to be here on his podcast to share a little bit of that journey with you.
Yeah, and talking about the journey that you and me have traveled in, I can remember a number of incidences. One where it was more seriously that we were attacked. You would remember we went to a place in Jubilee, in Winterveld, where we actually were attacked. You wanna recall on that?
Was that the time where they lit a fire?
Yes.
And I tried to drag the logs
Yes.
out of the way, and
I ended up getting hit. Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
No, I mean that happens,
Yeah.
So in South Africa, fighting for democracy sometimes does actually mean exactly that. And we never the aggressor, but when we go to places where people believe that we shouldn't be spreading our message, they often try to stop us by force.
Yeah.
And then we don't run away, we stand our ground. Obviously, often the security wants to take us away, but we have always stood our ground, and that was one case in point. I think you were hit by a projectile.
Yeah.
There's several times where people have been hit by projectiles, and I've also once been shot even. So, it goes with the territory, and it's part of the stories you tell your children, and they don't believe eventually. And hopefully your grandchildren won't believe them at all, because we'll all be living in a prosperous and safe South Africa.
Well, can we just talk about, families and our children? How are the grandchildren, Helen?
Well, now you're really starting me on a subject, so you're going to have to stop me. My grandchildren are wonderful. They are the literal light of my life.
Yeah.
They are 6 and 4 now.
Oh.
And I live between the times that I see them. They fortunately live in Cape Town with me. I'm the mother of boys, as you are the father of boys.
Of boys, yeah.
But fortunately, I've got a granddaughter now, which is a whole new experience. And I love it.
Well, it should be something very precious. And I guess, reading your book, Not Without a Fight, and having followed you, I mean, we've known each other now 20 years or so. And, for me, Helen, it's also about knowing Helen, the worker, the Iron Lady, as you were called at some point. It could have been that at some point you were not able to spend as much time as you would love with your children, and then now you're making it up maybe with the grandchildren. But do you want to maybe give us a little bit of the tough times and what it meant for you at that time?
So you're right. People think that you have it all, but you don't have it all. Because you can't have it all. There are not enough hours in the day. And when I was mayor and leader of the party at the same time, or premier and leader of the party at the same time, my work literally was like a tidal wave. It took over 24/7, except in the 5 or 6 hours that I might have been sleeping at night. And my children were growing up in those days, and I felt really guilty often about leaving them for such long periods of time and not being around for them. But fortunately, they think I was always around for them.
Yeah.
I don't disabuse them of that notion unless they're watching this podcast. And we've still got a wonderful, wonderful relationship. And of course, it wouldn't have been possible without my husband. He was was a marvelous father. He really supported me in my work and was the pillar at home as well. So he often went to sports matches, to prize givings, to outings that I couldn't go on. And I felt that I lost out a lot. And I'm sure if my children had gone totally off the rails, people would have said, oh, well, that was because Zille was never at home.
Yeah, that was
her fault.
Isn't that a South African thing, though, that if things go wrong, it's the mother's
Always
fault, but
the
if
mother's
when things happen right, then, the father must take the credit.
But I am so grateful that my kids are fine, and their father deserves a lot of the credit.
Well, we salute you, sir, and then, that you may still smell your roses while you're still alive, and that hopefully your children and your grandchildren really appreciate that. Prof. So yeah, good, kudos to you. Helen, you spoke about sports as well, and I know that you're an avid cyclist as well. Do you do that with your children, with your grandchildren?
Yes, well, with my grandchildren, I'm hoping to do a lot more. They had bicycles, and then they got scooters. And
I get a headache when you talk about those, because my little one has one. He's got a ShopRite 6060 scooter that I posted on, and the little bugger only goes on that at night. Yeah. It's like, for some funny reason, during the day, he plays with other toys, and then when I want to watch the news or want to relax, then he wants to get onto that thing, and I now need to push him around.
Yeah, I know exactly. So I love bike riding. I've got an e-bike now, which is a new thing for me. I got it at a lovely little place called Chilled Squirrel. What a funny little name, but it was very nice, and they've been giving me excellent services. But I did have a fall, and I'll even show you. I ripped my pants. And these were only clean pants I had this morning, so I had a couple of hours on. But I fell in these pants on the ground, and I ripped the pants there. But I love cycling, and I was thinking in the Argus, I missed it so much because I did 2 of the Arguses without an e-bike, and I might even try to train for the next Argus. We'll see.
Wow. That is great inspiration, Helen. I've done the 94.7. I must tell you, that was something very much grueling, and I quite enjoyed it as well, because not only did it give me an opportunity to be amongst hundreds and thousands of cyclists that were there on the day, but it also allowed me to have a look around Johannesburg and certain parts, I would say a touch in Ekurhuleni and then back into Johannesburg, where you're able to then see your city, or you're able to see part of your province. But, what does that, for you, what does that mean when you're able to then get on a bike and then see where things are working, where things are not working, and what does it mean, for you?
Well, there's no way to see your surroundings like on a bicycle. By foot, you can't go very far.
Yeah.
But on a bike, you can go far, and you can take it in. And fortunately now, I ride in the beautiful parts, and there are lots of beautiful parts in Cape Town, and a lot of cycle paths where you can really ride. So it's fantastic doing that. But I once rode from Plettenberg Bay to Cape Town.
Sure, okay.
Yes, but with a lot of help. So I can't claim that I went up all of those hills after Riversdale on my own. I was on a tandem at that stage with a very nice guy who had more muscles in his legs than I did. But and I saw a lot of places, because we went into the towns and into the various, and I saw a lot of my province that way. It was very, very important to see it that way.
But one other thing, Helen, is that, you speak about a beautiful place that, is Cape Town, or part of the Western Cape. And, a great contribution of that being as it is now has to do with, the foresight that you had, and you putting some energy, and those that you were working with putting some energy. And it didn't come, as easy as people think that, it did come, or that all the things that you had to go through, it just came out of the blue. You had to really struggle. I know, reading in your book, how you had to actually go and try and put a coalition together that, wants to hold. And this is something that I want to really dive a little bit into. But do you want to take us through that?
Yes, of course, this is very relevant to you, Sonny, because when you become Premier of Gauteng, you're also going to probably have to put together a complex coalition. And that's why in the DA we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We share our learnings with each other all the time, and we've just had a workshop precisely on how to do that. So it's been a great pleasure for me to distill the learnings that I've had. But you're going to have it harder than I had it, much harder. And that is because when we took Cape Town away from the ANC in 2006, it wasn't as broken as Johannesburg or as Tshwane is now. And when we took over the Western Cape from the ANC in 2009, it wasn't nearly as broken as Gauteng is now. And that makes a big difference. I could rely on some very good officials and systems that were still functioning and infrastructure that was still functioning. We put an enormous amount of investment behind that infrastructure to maintain it and to build new infrastructure to prepare for the large amount of urbanization that we've got in South Africa. So we did a lot of work there, but it wasn't totally broken. And when I look at a colleague like Zille, trying to turn around...
Oh, kudos to him.
Yeah, a broken city. With, you know, when the ANC under administration, they siphoned billions out of that city. And it's almost impossible. When you even run a system of debt collection, you have corrupt people reconnecting people who are supposed to be disconnected. I mean, to run and to turn around a city based on a network of corrupt individuals with no resources, no money, and that kind of background is almost impossible. And I'm afraid, Solly, you may well face the same challenge in Gauteng. So we had it easier, but that doesn't mean to say that the lessons are irrelevant. The lessons are relevant. Putting together a coalition is hard. And often your biggest opposition comes from within your coalition. And often your coalition partners are actually trying to destroy you. And I wish voters would really understand that the more they divide and split the vote, the more difficult it is to govern afterwards.
Helen, you know, there's two things that you're raising that are important for me. One, you're talking about governance and what happens in administration, which I want to touch on a little bit later on, because it talks to what we fought around the issue of cadre deployment. But I want to have a chat about that later on, so that people understand why we did what we had to do. What was the thinking? But I want to spend a little bit of time talking to the issue of coalitions, because most people tend to think that coalition is a new thing in South Africa. But I've listened to a talk that you have given, and I didn't know some of the things that you were unpacking. And I think it will be amiss for me to not afford the viewers an opportunity to have an understanding. And I want to give you an opportunity to then unpack it from the time where, even the time of the ANC, when it was before the 1994 elections. What was happening there?
Well, I have made a big study of coalitions because I had to try and manage a very difficult one. 7 parties, not nearly as difficult as you're going to have, but it was hard. And I've also seen how in South Africa you have to work together with others if you want to achieve your objectives without abandoning your core principles. That's really important. Now, there's the kind of coalition that we know today, which is different parties winning a certain number of votes, putting their percentages together to get over 50% in a sphere of government. That's the coalitions that we know. But there are many other forms of cooperation that amount to different forms of coalition that have brought parties to power in South Africa. I was very involved in, for example, some of the organizations that were part of the UDF in the 1980s. Now, that was what we call a whole of society approach, pulling together absolutely everybody you can imagine, all the tiniest, smallest organizations, social clubs, trade unions, civil society organizations across the board, together into one mass movement to achieve democracy in South Africa.
And these, by the way, were multiracial, were different economic circumstances and all of that, right?
Completely across the board. And they came together with one objective, to end apartheid in South Africa. And then you would see the ANC putting together what it calls the Tripartite Alliance, which is an internal form of coalition, if you like. It takes the South African Communist Party, it takes the COSATU trade unions, it takes the ANC, the political party, puts them together and then maximizes their combined forces, which gave the ANC that huge push into the 1994 election. So we are not unused to that kind of strategy. But it happens in very different ways. Obviously, the ANC put together the tripartite alliance before the election. We've put together the multi-party charter, or the Moonshot Pact, before the election. And those are some of the kinds of things to say we want to work together to achieve a certain end that we will achieve more together than separately.
Yeah.
But it still means that people must not fracture the vote too much, because we've shown in this 11-party coalition we had in Nelson Mandela Bay, completely ungovernable.
Yeah.
You can't do it. And so the more we consolidate the vote, the better.
But, you know, Helen, I want to go back, you know, because there was a time when even Cape Town itself, you know, had to be put, you had to put a coalition together. I want you to tell that story. And it's important because, you know, people look at what is happening in Ekurhuleni now. People look at what happened in Johannesburg and say, ah, well, it's not going to work. But Cape Town is an excellent, you know, example. And, you know, there's other areas where coalitions are actually working outside of Gauteng, you know, where coalitions are working and are working perfectly. And people don't know that because they're only concentrating on where maybe things might not be working as well. Do you want to talk to that?
Yes, I do. When Tony Leon, I was a member of Parliament in 2004, which wasn't a great election for us. We only got 27% in the Greater Cape Town area in the 2004 election. But then it was a local government election in 2006, and Tony Leon asked me to stand as the mayoral candidate for Cape Town. And I said to him, I know nothing about local government, nothing. And he said, don't worry, you'll learn if you have to. You know, he's a great believer in throwing people in the deep end
and then swim.
and coming out the other side, exactly. And he said, in any case, you're very unlikely to get elected, so that's fine. You just go and try and maximize our vote.
Yeah.
So I went in there, and we did get 42% of the vote. But 42% is not 50% plus 1.
Yeah.
So to get the mayor elected, you need 50% plus 1 in the council. So the ID didn't want to come with us. Patricia de Lille's ID was with the ANC. They had 11%. If 11% plus 42% would have taken us over 50%. But they refused, and they went with the ANC. But even with the ANC that only got 38% in that election, they couldn't make it to over 50%. So then we added 6 other tiny parties, you know, the Universal Party, the African Muslim Party, the ACDP, the AIC, the Freedom Front Plus, all of those tiny parties. We added them together, and we could just about get over 50%. But we needed one more vote to get over 50%. And obviously that was the seat held by the PAC. And the councillor there was Councillor Bennett Joko. And we needed that vote at least to abstain. If that vote abstained, we would take the mayoral election. So the night before the election, I thought, I really need to chat to him about the possibility of abstaining. So I took a colleague and we drove out to his house.
At night.
Late at night. And he lived in a shack, I think it was in the Greater Philippi area, if I'm not mistaken. And I phoned him from my car.
Okay.
And he put his head out. And he was holding the phone on his ear. And I said, I'm Helen Zille, the DA's mayoral candidate, and I'm parked outside your house, and could I speak to you? And he said, looked out, he said, sure, come in. He was incredibly warm.
Yeah.
And blow me down, that very day, it was the 14th of March, I'll never forget it, 2006, his wife had just come back from the hospital after giving birth to their daughter.
Wow, okay.
And this baby literally was brand new.
Yeah.
And he said, no, my wife's just had a baby, and I saw the baby and everything, and her name was Azania. I'll never forget that. And then he offered me a cup of tea, and I thought, shame, his wife's he said, I'd love a cup of tea. And he made me a cup of tea, and we sat there and we chatted. And I said, I'd really like to ask you to abstain tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm the DA's mayoral candidate, and I'd like to ask you to abstain in the election for mayor, because then we have a chance of winning. So we had a long chat, and he said, yes, I will abstain. And he said, by the way, why didn't you ask me to vote for you? So I said, well, I didn't ask you to vote for me because I thought our political philosophies are
Yeah,
too
will be
divergent.
too divergent, yeah.
I didn't feel that it was appropriate to
Yeah.
ask you to vote for me. He said, you must never make that assumption. But he says, I will definitely abstain. And then I went home and I said to my husband, you know, I could be elected mayor tomorrow. I could be elected
The accidental mayor.
Yeah. If everybody who says they're going to vote with us,
Yeah.
those 6 other parties, and if the PAC abstains, I will be the mayor tomorrow. Well, it was a very dramatic session. You know, I said to my husband, please, you know, would you come with me? And he said, no, I've got to take the car for a service. And I said, no.
He thought it will be over in no time. You'll be back to your normal
The
job.
whole afternoon we were there, took hours and hours. The ANC kept on asking for caucus breaks so they could pressure everybody, but in the end we made it.
Wow.
And I remember we made it by 1 vote, and Bennett Joko looked at me across the entire, that big council chamber they have in Cape Town, and he winked at me.
Wow.
As if to say, I did what I promised you.
But Helen, you know, for me, it reminds me of what happened in Tshwane because, you know, again, in 2016 when I took over, it was more of you knew that you had an opportunity because the ANC was brought under 50%, and actually in Tshwane was brought under 40%, yes. Which we were able to then get to the numbers that, you know, we could put together to get to a coalition. But one of the things that we didn't do at that time was to have meetings where we then say, how do we govern together, and how do we then ensure that, you know, there is, call it rules in place to govern the relationship that we have as coalition partners, but also, you know, how do we then deal with each other when there is squabbles or when there is, you know, actually, what do you call, disagreements in terms of what direction that you should be taking. And I'm sure that you faced as well, because part of what I know and really haven't read from your book is, you know, a situation where people then came in and all of a sudden, if they were to remain with you, it was about positions, it was about patronage and getting people into positions. Do you want to talk to them?
Yes, I do. You know, the DA has some very important political principles and values. That's what brings you and me together.
Yeah.
We have very different backgrounds,
Yeah.
but we believe in the same values.
Right, yeah.
And that's why we are together, shoulder to shoulder,
Yeah.
building a society based on those values, so that your sons and my grandchildren, and one day your grandchildren,
Yeah.
can flourish together.
Right.
That's the basis on which we build our party. But there are many other parties that don't build their party on that basis. And when they get into office, they just want as many jobs or as many opportunities to get tenders as they can. And it makes it very difficult. At the very worst, it becomes an extortion racket,
Yeah.
like with, I'm afraid, the PA and Gate McKenzie, what he did with us in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
You know, the DA is offering me 1 position, go to the ANC, how many are offering me? 2 positions, come back to the DA, the ANC is offering me 2 positions now.
Yeah.
No, we don't work
Yeah.
that way. And it's very difficult when you're putting together a coalition, and that's what your partners expect you to do, to walk the line between holding them in and sticking up for your principles. It's very difficult to do that. And it's important to know that there is a line, and where that line is, and where you are beginning to blur the line, and how much you are prepared to blur the line before you cross it completely. And to be able to still say, will we be able to achieve our delivery and governance outcomes if this line is a little bit blurred?
Yeah.
And how can we hold people accountable for the job they have to do, so they realize that appointing people who can do the job actually matters?
Yeah.
So it's that kind of judgment you have to make, and it's extremely difficult in the context. But you have to, A, know what your values and principles are, B, know where the line is, B, know where it's getting blurred, and know where to pull things back. And you've got to be prepared to get out of power.
Yeah.
You can't compromise and compromise and compromise on your values to the point that there's no difference between you and the ANC.
Yeah.
You've got to know at what point you say, that's enough. The compromises we've made now are making it impossible for us to deliver on our commitments in government, and now we're out.
Well, I like the fact that, you know, you're talking about knowing what are the boundaries and knowing, you know, what you're not willing to do and what you can do.
Correct.
But I think it is important as well for residents know that, you know, they cannot expect, you know, not to prop the Democratic Alliance to to have a chunk in which will ensure that you don't have to then bring in so many other people and then, end up having to then compromise yourself to a point where we're not even able to deliver for them.
If people want a coalition to work, there's got to be one very strong anchor party that can be the central pillar around which everything is built. If you don't have that, it will end up as a squabbling and a bribery and extortion racket, not a coalition. And I wish people would really understand how difficult it is to run these coalitions and how easily they unravel. That is why we need to consolidate the vote, not fragment the vote. The ANC is fragmenting now, and it will continue fragmenting for a long time. They're past the point of no return. They will keep on fragmenting. What we have to do is consolidate and build the alternative. That's what we have to do. But voters need to get it. They really need to get it.
Well, I think, that brings me to a point about, why the Moonshot Pact was actually brought together. Because I think for me, it was an issue of saying, look, we have learned our lessons since 2016. And we cannot just wait until after the elections and then say, but how do we put a government together? It has to be about, the what. I always say the reason why we put it together was that we needed to say, what does the country look post this period that we find ourselves in? The second part is, what do we then need to do? So it's the what does it look like? What do we now need to then do? And then you get to the third point, which is the who. So it's the what, the how, and the who. And then do you want to talk to that in terms of how we're able to then start getting into the mode of then, consolidating, call it the right or the aligned thinking around different parties to then say, can we consolidate our energies, not in terms of going out to campaign, but in terms of how we can put a plan, to then A and C, but B, to then be able to then get South Africa to where it needs to go.
Well, absolutely. What we needed to show South Africa is that there is hope. And there is a pathway to victory for the rational centre of politics in South Africa. And that is what the Moonshot Pact was all about. It was saying, for once, for the first time, we have a pathway to victory. And most especially in Gauteng. Most especially in Gauteng, where we are neck and neck with the ANC. Neck and neck with the ANC. And we can overtake them. We can become the biggest party in Gauteng. And with the Moonshot Pact, we can and we should become the government in Gauteng. That will be a game changer for South Africa. We also had great hopes in KwaZulu-Natal with one of our Moonshot partners, the IFP, and that was going very well indeed. So let's just see what happens. There's a shortcut for South Africa to the path of progress and prosperity, and let's just hope the voters take it.
Well, I think the voters must just do what needs to be done. But Helen, I spoke earlier on about the need to ensure that we get a government that is able to work and fire on all cylinders. Well, from a political perspective, we're doing what needs to be done. But there's another element that is very critical, and that is the administration, where you do have people that are the implementers of what we want to then see happening. And in South Africa, we have seen things fall apart. We've seen SAA fall apart. We've seen Transnet fall apart. We've seen Tinel fall apart. We've seen ESCOM falling apart. And, I can go on. And this is why we, from a DA perspective, we decided that no, we need to do something in order to make sure that ultimately we stop the issue of politically aligned administrators being in government, but need to make sure that we have people that have the skills, that have the know-how, but are also going to then ensure that the work of government continues, irrespective of who are the political principles, in that particular space. You want to talk to that?
Yes, I do. We believe in a professional public service. We believe in people who are appointed because they are absolutely fit to do that job. They're the best people who applied, and that they are prepared to respect the will of the electorate. So if the electorate in Gauteng were to put the DA into office, they would say, that's the choice of the people. My job is to implement the DA's policies Whether or not I agree with them is irrelevant. But in a democracy, I've got to bring all my effort and energy and expertise to bear on delivering on those policies.
Yeah.
And not as an extension of the DA, but as a technocrat, let's say an engineer
Yeah.
or whatever, to get the infrastructure built, to get the roads working, to get the potholes filled, to get the sewerage working, to get the water there, or whatever it is. So we believe in a professional public service.
Yeah.
And we know that obviously at the very top, political parties are allowed to do contracts for the best people they can find, who may well be aligned to their values and their policies, but we do not believe in cadre deployment at all. Cadre deployment is about a process rather than an outcome.
Right.
The ANC starts with the ANC Deployment Committee. They decide who is going to be in every position to serve the ANC and subvert the purpose of the institution to serve the ANC first, not the people of South Africa. And then they work to get that outcome through manipulating the systems. The DA says, we trust the process. We want a merit-based process. Anybody can apply. Let's see who is the best candidate. We've just been through a process, Solly. You've been through a grueling process.
Yeah, don't mind me, Helen.
Now, obviously, when we're choosing public representatives, it's very different from choosing officials of the state. We believe in a separation of party and state.
Right.
But even if you want to become a political representative for the DA, you've got to pass exams, you've got to pass tests, you've got to write articles, you've got to make speeches, you've got to do the DA's policy exam, you've got to do the history
You have to
exam.
show your involvement in communities.
You've got to do a whole lot of things,
Yeah.
right? And then we take 1,300 people who apply and we whittle it down. We lose about 1,000 along the way to get the best candidates. You know what it's like. So we believe in the process and we believe in getting the very best people we can. And when we get into government, in the first term, Solly, you go with huge aspirations. You'll find that you'll be able, if you're lucky, to stabilize Gauteng's finances and get the right people into the right positions who can do the job professionally. And if you do that, then you'll see the rest follow.
And I think, Helen, that's important because, you know, we're seeing a transition happening in South Africa. We're seeing a political transition, if I may call it that we're moving away from a one-party dominance that has been in place. Now, this year will be 70 years. Because if you look at the 40 years of the apartheid era, you know, national party dominance, and then you now have, you know, the ANC dominance that is now coming to an end. So you would have had 70 years of that. And then you would have also had, in the last 30 years, a move from ensuring that you have an administration that is politically free or that doesn't have political you know, attachments that we're now sitting with, and which will then mean that you're going to have problems of things like sabotage as you go into government. You're going to have people that are just not willing to then implement, and you're also going to have to deal with a culture that you have to then sort of, you know, get rid of not holding people to account. Because, you know, as I see in certain instances, it's difficult for somebody who is a head of department, you know, and having to answer to an MEC as an example, or to an MMC. And on the reverse, you find that that same head of department is somebody's branch chairperson. So this person cannot then deal with this one, you know, in the job, or cannot then get them to do their job, because then, you know, there's repercussion in the political space.
Well, you see, that's death. That's death to government. That's how you end up with a captured, destroyed state.
Yeah.
The ANC captures institutions that should be independent to deliver to the people and to defend the rights of the people. Instead, they become extensions of the ANC, serving the ruling faction of the ANC and defending them from the people. That's what we've got. And, you know, that's where I was so lucky. When I came into office as the mayor of Cape Town and then as the premier of the Western Cape, the public service wasn't so broken.
Yeah.
There were still excellent officials. It wasn't riddled with corruption. It wasn't. I mean, now when you look at Tshwane, when Celia does the necessary thing, when they're big shopping centres or whatever it is who refuse to pay their electricity, he's got to cut them off.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're going to be insolvent, you're going to be bankrupt, right? But then they're just going to pay somebody behind the scenes to reconnect them.
Yeah.
somebody from the government, somebody from your own government,
Yeah.
goes and reconnects them for a bribe.
Mm.
Huh. You can't get anywhere if you are riddled with corruption
Yeah.
like that. Now, that is a horrific place to start, with a corrupt civil service.
But Helen, you know, you touched on something very important for me, is that, you know, sometimes we point fingers at government and we don't look at what we are doing. And I'm scared that there is a culture that we have now sort of embraced in South Africa, a wrong culture of demanding for things that we're not willing to pay for, even if we can actually pay for those services. And unfortunately, we have a premier here that seems to also be promoting that, you know, for his own political expediency. I mean, as an example, you go and fix transformers, but you're not making sure that those transformers are connected to meters that are going into houses. So again, people continue to connect illegally, and they overwhelm, you know, the transformers, and they blow up again. So it doesn't look like we're addressing that. You know, what have you faced something similar where, you know, you have to then go against an ingrained culture that you have to then work against and work to reverse?
It's incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard to change culture. Let me give you an example. We had people with massive water bills, and you know, water is a right, so that you can't cut people's water off completely. You have to throttle their water.
Yeah.
And then they get very little. And then we decided we're going to put in water meters. People must then decide, and it was back in 2006, how much money do they want to spend on water a month? 20 Rand, 30 Rand, 50 Rand. We put in the meters, and then you have to pay for the amount of water you want to use, and it cuts off when you've used that amount. So you get your free basic water, which doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
Then you get the added amount that you are prepared to pay for,
Right.
and then it cuts you off. So everyone was in uproar about this. It was an uproar, and I said, we have to change the culture of non-payment, and we also have to fix the leaks. And the great thing about that system is it'll show you when there's no water running in your house, if the meter's still turning, you've got a leak.
Yeah.
So we said, what we will do is, if that happens to you, we will fix your leak for free. So have a meter, it'll enable you to control your expenditure, we won't have to cut you off, and you can detect your leaks, and we will fix your leaks. That's how we came to reduce leaks so profoundly in Cape Town. But then I said, I'll be the first one to put a water meter in my house.
Yeah.
And I put a water meter in my house, and we had a little cottage there and everything, so I said, okay, 100 Rand a month we want to spend on water, and we had the 100 Rand a month. Once I was at the function, my son phones me, says, Mom, no water. I said, yes, we've used 100 Rand this month, and now
It's it. That's finished.
That's it, absolutely. So the point is that we've got to change culture. We can't think that everyone can have exactly what they like, and it's got to be subsidized by the state, which is not the state's money, it's other ratepayers and taxpayers' money that is
And
being
it cuts
used.
from other programs as well.
It cuts from other programs as well.
Yeah.
We have to change the culture. People are agents, they must take their choices. And the most critical choice people must make is to get an education before they have babies.
Yeah.
No, I'm on and
Yeah,
on about
yeah.
that. Otherwise you're condemning your children
Yes.
to poverty. And to stay off drugs. Stay off drugs. Otherwise you've got no future, and you will never get out of poverty.
Well, I can say, you know, on that, Helen, that, you know, it's trying to make sure that you are lessening the burden now, so that you can enjoy the fruits at a later time. You know, that I can agree with. But Helen, you know, one of the other things that I wanted to touch base with you around is the issue of people who are saying that, you know, it doesn't matter what happens now, you know, this country is ruined. I don't believe that this country is ruined. I still believe that this country is very, very much pregnant with opportunities that needs to be explored. Maybe, you know, say something on that.
Well, massively, massively.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got everything going for us, Sonny. We've got the best climate in the world, despite climate change.
Yeah.
We've got the richest mineral resources almost in the whole world. We've got great agricultural land. If only we could get it to produce food and jobs, it would be magnificent. We've got great infrastructure. If only we would maintain it and build on it. We've got so much to lose, and we've got so much to build on. It is so worth it. And you know what? The whole world is going to look like South Africa in the next century. There are no such things as national boundaries anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, Europe thinks it can stop the migration to Europe. It's not going to be able to do that.
Right.
We're going to have to learn to live together in a common society with rules and systems and principles and values and a common culture that can make us succeed together.
Yeah.
Now, we are in South Africa with the opportunity to make that happen, to be an example to the rest of the world. And I really believe we can do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't get up every morning and try.
Well, do you believe, Helen, that some of these things are artificial, call it fallback position for those that are failing to do certain things? I mean, you speak about people who, you talk about boundaries or borders as an example, that in a long term, or as we go, we're not going to have those. These are going to, in any way, you know, as we are becoming a globalized village, you know, they're going to disappear at some point. That people are not addressing the economic challenges that people find themselves in. They're not addressing the safety, because again, you know, people don't find jobs, and there's foreigners that are taking our jobs. People are not finding, or we're not able to then put security in place, proper security measures in place, and therefore, you know, then you want to blame people that are coming from outside, you know, the country. And those that want to then be populist will then say, well, everybody must then be chucked out, and then we need to start from scratch, as if that is something that, you know, can be done. You know, do you believe that this is just an easy scapegoating instead of then addressing the real challenges that we're sitting with?
Well, the real challenge is to have a non-corrupt Department of Home Affairs. The real challenge is to have a highly efficient, well-staffed Department of Home Affairs. The real challenge is to get proper border policing and border controls and uncorrupt officials there, and to be able to process people in a humane way so that if they have a legal right to be here, they can stay here legally, and if not, they can be dealt with quickly and not live here for 15 years before the system catches up with them and they are integrated into society. You cannot come with populist answers like round everybody up and kick them out.
Yeah, as somebody in the green will normally say, "Mabahande," as if, you know, you'll start just chasing people out without, you know, actually then endangering people's lives, which is something that I found very bizarre.
We're not a populist party. We're a pragmatic party that cares for the rule of law, that is absolutely committed to non-racialism, and that wants to see South Africa and Africa work. That's our mission.
Yeah. Well, on a lighter note, Helen, as we wrap up, you know, I really enjoyed this session, and I hope that, you know, the people of South Africa and those that are seeing this podcast will get a new, you know, idea of who we are, what we're all about, and what we're thinking, you know, going forward. But on a lighter note, I know you have served, you know, when Jacob Zuma was actually the president of a country, and there's a story that you tell, and I have something similar, you know, of the gentle or the soft part of him. I remember when I met him, you know, I went as the mayor for the first meeting when we went to. The man bought me cake, and the ministers were like, "But whose birthday is it?" And then he came out and says, you know, that little one. He says, "No, this is for you." And you know, that for me was something different. And just on a, you know, to show that there is something beyond the person.
Jacob Zuma has got a very deep human streak. There's no question about that. And I encountered it very often. I mean, when my own party was crushing me into the ground, Jacob Zuma phoned me and he said, "It must be very hard for you." And it was very hard for me. And I thought, and you know, when I was elected premier, I had to go to the first cabinet, the Khotla. And he phoned me, and he said, "Premier, I just want to say you'll be the only DA person here, but you mustn't be worried. You'll be warmly welcome." That's the kind of humanity he's got inside him. But that lives side by side with a very corrupt streak. But he often said to me that he didn't see it as corruption, that he saw it as applying black economic empowerment. Which it was in the ANC's. Which it was in the ANC's lexicon. That's why we oppose that methodology. Because it can only result in corruption and state collapse and state capture.
But have you found that kind of the humanness or the kind of warmth? I don't know if you've ever dealt with Cyril or with Thabo Mbeki or you've with any other of the other political leaders. I know you've had engagements with Mangosuthu before.
Yeah.
You know, any of them
Yes.
that stands out?
I mean, I could understand why Jacob Zuma got so popular in the ANC. It's because he has that very strong humanity, actually, and he'll notice it's your birthday, and he'll do that sort of thing, which means a lot to people.
Yeah.
But when he's sitting there chairing a meeting, you go mad because it carries on and on and on and on, and people talk completely off the point, and
Yeah.
you never reach a conclusion or
Yeah.
anything, and you want to go through the roof. Thabo Mbeki was very businesslike.
Yeah.
He knew what the issue was, he wanted to discuss things intellectually, he wanted to analyze things intellectually, and he didn't have that natural warmth that Jacob
Yeah.
Zuma had. But in many ways, I much prefer to work with somebody who
Yes.
is like Thabo Mbeki.
Yeah.
And Cyril Ramaphosa, I found that he's just lacked that backbone that I hoped we all hoped he would have in 2019, didn't we?
Yeah, all
But
of
he
us,
didn't.
yes.
And so without courage in politics, you can do nothing.
Well, Helen, tell me, if you were to relive or redo two things, what would those be?
What would those be?
At any given point in your life, if you had to redo two things, or redo things in a different way, however you want to look at it.
You know, I would never not make the mistakes I've made, because I've learned much more through my mistakes than I have through the things I've done right.
Yeah.
So I welcome my mistakes. Phew.
Family?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
You know, I would have loved to have spent much more time with my
Yeah.
children and gone to all of their events and things.
Yeah.
But then I wouldn't have been able to do the other stuff that I think is very important to look after their future in this country.
Right.
So, you know, in the end, I've welcomed my life and regretted some things very badly. I've regretted the things that I've said to people that are hurtful or that have had long-term negative consequences for other people. I regret fighting with my mother as much as I used to when I was a teenager.
Well, both being Germans, I'm sure the blood in there is pushing you into a different direction. Yeah.
No, I love my mom very dearly, and we had a good relationship, but we would clash very, very toughly, which was quite hard, and I'm sorry about that now. Those sorts of things, you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Helen, for having come and spend the day with me. I think South Africans would have had an opportunity to get the side of you that they wouldn't have otherwise known. But more importantly, I think I'm thankful for the insight that you've given around the issues of coalitions, around the issues of government, but also for sharing light moments with us. This is Consolidating, and you have been watching Helen as the man in the arena. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you've learned something new. I'm looking forward to engaging with more men in the arena as we get to know more South Africans a whole lot better, as we get to know what their issues are, we get to know what is the aspiration, what is it that they have done in contributing towards building a South Africa that we know and South Africa that we want to then enjoy. Hope to see you again next time as we get into the arena with the next person. Thank you very much.